The thick forest was eerily silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves and the sound of Milo's rapid footsteps as he moved through the brush. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows on the trail. The cool air, tinged with the earthy scent of pine, sent a shiver down his spine. But it wasn't the cold that had him on edge. It was the persistent barking that echoed from deep within the cave. Milo had been hearing the barking for the past 20 minutes. It had started off as a faint noise, barely audible over the sounds of the forest, but now it was unmistakable. A sharp, urgent barking that seemed to come from the bowels of the earth itself. Milo's dog, Rocco, was not one to bark for no reason. He was a calm, stoic German shepherd, always alert, but never prone to unnecessary noise. But this was different. This was the kind of bark that pierced through the evening stillness, the kind that screamed of distress. "Rocco!" Milo called out, his voice rising in the direction of the cave. His hand clenched around the flashlight, though it did little to light the path ahead in the growing dusk. The cave entrance loomed in front of him, a yawning, dark mouth that seemed to swallow the fading daylight. The closer he got, the louder the barking became. It was frantic now, echoing off the cavernous walls. Rocco was in trouble. Milo's heart raced. He knew he shouldn't be here. He had come on this hike as a way to get away from the stresses of life, to clear his head. This wasn't part of the plan. But the sound of his dog's barking, his loyal, protective dog, drove him forward. "Come on, buddy," Milo muttered, forcing his feet to move despite the fear gnawing at him. He had no idea what lay ahead, but he had no choice. Rocco needed him. He took a deep breath, the cool air filling his lungs as he stepped closer to the mouth of the cave. The ground beneath his boots was rough, uneven. There was something ancient about this place, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. He paused at the entrance, squinting into the darkness beyond. The barking continued, now mixed with the sound of scraping like claws against stone. Milo hesitated, his instincts screaming at him to turn back. He was a hiker, not a spelunker. The cave was too deep, too dangerous. The last thing he needed was to get trapped in there. But Rocco's cries were not just calls for help. They were desperate. "Hang on, boy," he whispered to himself, stepping into the cave. The air grew cooler, damp with the scent of moss and earth. His flashlight flickered as he moved deeper, casting weak beams of light across the jagged walls. The barking was getting louder, more frantic, and Milo's heart pounded in his chest. Each step felt like an eternity as he made his way into the heart of the cave. Suddenly, he tripped over a rock, falling to his knees. He caught himself just before slamming into the cold stone floor, but it didn't stop the fear from rushing through him. His flashlight bounced on the ground, spinning wildly before landing on the ground and illuminating a small path ahead. He picked himself up, his hands shaking, and pressed forward. The sound of the barking was now overwhelming. Rocco was close, but why hadn't he come out yet? Milo's mind raced. What could possibly be so terrifying that Rocco hadn't even tried to escape? Milo rounded a corner, the tunnel narrowing as he went deeper into the cave. The walls seemed to close in on him, the darkness surrounding him like a living thing. But then, just ahead, he saw it, Rocco. The dog was crouched low to the ground, his body tense, his eyes wide with fear. But it wasn't just fear that showed in Rocco's eyes. There was something else, something deep and primal. And as Milo moved closer, he saw what had the dog so scared. Something was in the shadows. Milo froze, his body locking in place. In the darkness ahead, he could barely make out the shape of a large, looming figure. Something that didn't belong in a cave, something that shouldn't be there at all. Milo's heart pounded in his chest as he stood frozen, staring at the dark shape in the shadows ahead. Rocco, still crouched on the ground, was growling softly now, his body tense, but he didn't approach. Milo's flashlight flickered weakly, casting jagged shadows against the walls. The shape in the darkness was large, too large to be a typical cave formation. It wasn't a boulder or a stalactite. It was something else, something that wasn't supposed to be there. As Milo's eyes slowly adjusted to the darkness, the outline of the figure began to take shape. It was tall, unnaturally tall. The edges of the figure were almost imperceptible, blending into the cave's natural shadows as if it were part of the stone itself. But as Milo took another cautious step forward, he could make out more details: long, spindly limbs, and the unmistakable feeling of something watching him from the depths. Rocco's barking intensified, but this time it wasn't frantic. It was sharp, protective, as if urging Milo to understand the danger. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. This wasn't just a wild animal or a trick of the shadows. It was something that didn't belong in this world. The air around him seemed to thicken, the temperature dropping rapidly as he continued to inch forward. The eerie silence enveloping the cave once again. "Milo, don't move." The voice was low and unnatural, barely above a whisper. It came from the figure. Its mouth didn't move, but the words felt like they were being projected into his mind. Milo froze. His body tensed, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from the figure. "I've been waiting for you. For a long time." The voice continued, echoing in his head. The coldness of the cave now seemed to seep into his bones as the figure stepped closer, its tall form growing more defined in the dim light of the flashlight. It was no longer just a shadow. It was a being, one that had been hiding, waiting, in the deepest recesses of the earth. Rocco, still on the ground, finally stood. His fur bristled with aggression, his eyes glowing with a deep, primal understanding. The dog wasn't just defending Milo, it was protecting them from something ancient, something powerful that Milo didn't yet understand. "What do you want?" Milo managed to ask, his voice shaky but firm. The figure's presence was overwhelming, but the thought of his dog standing beside him gave him strength. The figure didn't respond immediately. Instead, it tilted its head slightly, as though contemplating the question. Then, with a voice that seemed to reverberate in the very walls of the cave, it spoke again. "The dog knows," it said, its voice like an unsettling whisper that filled Milo's mind. "Your dog has seen it all. He is not just a companion, he is a guardian. And now he has led you here, to the heart of what has been hidden for centuries." Milo's breath hitched. He turned to Rocco, whose eyes met his with a calm assurance. This wasn't just a regular dog. He was something more, something linked to a history and a purpose far beyond anything Milo could comprehend. "What are you talking about?" Milo whispered, barely able to find the words. He felt his knees weaken as the air in the cave seemed to grow heavier. The figure took another step forward, its presence overwhelming, and the shadows around it twisted unnaturally, as though they were alive. "You have opened the door," it said softly. "The door to the old world, where guardians walked the earth. The door to the past. And now it's time for the truth to be known." Rocco barked loudly again, his voice clear and sharp. But this time, the figure didn't flinch. Instead, it stepped aside, gesturing toward a narrow passageway deep within the cave, hidden behind layers of stone. It was a passage that Milo had not noticed before, one that seemed to have been concealed for centuries. "This is where it ends," the figure murmured. "The truth is waiting for you." Milo hesitated. Every instinct told him to leave, to run. But Rocco had brought him here. His dog, who had never wavered, had led him to this moment, this unbelievable truth. With a deep breath, Milo stepped forward, the ground beneath his feet shaking as he approached the passageway. The walls seemed to close in around him, but he wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Rocco stood beside him, guiding him into the narrow passage, the way ahead, illuminated by the faint glow of his flashlight. As they moved deeper into the cave, Milo knew he was about to uncover something that would change everything. And for the first time in his life, he was ready to face whatever came next.